the forbidden love that shook heaven. Have you ever wondered what became of the women who chose to love fallen angels? Beings cast out of heaven more than they honored the laws of God. This is not just a tale of star-crossed lovers. It's the untold story of angelic rebellion, forbidden desire, and divine judgment. These women, captivated by glory not meant for mortals, found themselves entangled in a love that heaven never permitted. Their angelic husbands, once radiant servants of the Most High, turned against the throne they once adored. And the price for that betrayal catastrophic. Their giant offspring, the Nephilim, were wiped out by a flood so vast it washed away entire civilizations. The archangel Michael himself was sent to intervene, not just to lead the charge against the Nephilim, but to pronounce final judgment on the wives of the rebels as well. But the greatest shock came after the flood, when their punishment didn't end with loss. It continued in the spiritual realm. The souls of these women, once enchanted by forbidden love, were transformed into something haunting, and tragic sirens cursed to echo their sorrow through time. Even today, their cries surface in myth and legend, their story a whisper woven into the nightmares of sailors and seekers alike. But how did such a beautiful story of love at first sight become a cosmic tragedy? The answer begins high above, among angels who were never supposed to feel what they did. When angels looked down and fell, it began with a glance, a single moment of curiosity that turned eternity upside down. In the high courts of heaven, where celestial order reigned and angels moved in perfect harmony, no one expected temptation to appear. The angels were radiant beings created to serve, to worship, to protect. Their purpose was divine, their loyalty unquestioned. But then something entirely unexpected happened. They looked down. And what they saw wasn't sin or rebellion, it was beauty, earthly beauty, human beauty. Women of flesh and bone, laughter and longing. There was nothing angelic about them, yet they radiated something that drew the eyes of even the most disciplined watchers. These weren't just passing curiosities, they were mesmerizing in a way heaven had never known. Raw, real, mortal. The more the angels gazed, the deeper the pull became. What started as observation turned into obsession. Their thoughts, once filled with worship and light, grew clouded by longing. They imagined what it might be like to feel, to touch, to be loved not by God alone, but by another soul. Desire, foreign and forbidden, crept into hearts that had once burned solely with holy fire. And with each passing day, more angels joined in the watching. The heavens grew quiet as the watchers turned their gaze downward, not in service, but in secret. Meanwhile, on earth, something strange stirred in the hearts of women. A strange electricity charged the air. They couldn't explain it, but they felt seen, chosen, almost marked, as if some vast ancient force had set its eyes upon them. The atmosphere felt thick, like the quiet right before a massive storm. A storm no one could escape. The angels knew the stakes. They remembered their purpose. But desire, once sparked, can be hard to extinguish. The question that echoed through their minds was one no angel had dared ask before. What if love was worth the fall, the arrival of the fallen? The moment the angels descended, everything changed. They no longer floated above the earth as silent watchers. They stepped onto it, fully committed to their rebellion. But this wasn't a quiet entrance. It was a spectacle. When these fallen angels appeared, it was as if beauty itself had taken human form, only more radiant, more intoxicating, and far more dangerous. Imagine the most breathtaking person you've ever seen. Now imagine them wrapped in light, with a presence so magnetic it stole the breath from every room. That's how these beings appeared. They didn't walk, they glided. Their voices didn't speak, they sang. Villages fell silent. Crowds stopped mid-task. The atmosphere shifted. It was like the sun had come down to walk among mortals, and everyone looked up to bask in its glow. The women were powerless to resist. This wasn't normal attraction, it was enchantment. These angels didn't need to say much. Their very presence promised something otherworldly. Their skin shimmered like moonlight. Their eyes held the vastness of galaxies. And when they smiled, hearts surrendered. But behind those perfect faces were secrets darker than night. Their smiles were too practiced. Their eyes, though mesmerizing, carried the weight of eternity, the kind of depth that hides unspeakable things. These weren't men. They were beings who had chosen to abandon holiness for desire, and with every whispered word and lingering glance, they drew the women in deeper. The women began to change, subtly at first. They carried themselves differently. Their eyes glowed with a borrowed light. Life with regular men seemed pale, uninteresting, even pointless. The angels had given them a glimpse of something greater, and now nothing else would satisfy. These weren't just flings or fairy tale romances. Every time an angel took a human wife, it sent spiritual shockwaves through creation. Because the unions that followed weren't just wrong, they were unnatural. And the children that came from them, they would change the world forever. The birth of the Nephilim. From these forbidden unions came offspring that defied nature itself, the Nephilim. These were not ordinary children. From the moment they were born, it was clear something ancient and unnatural flowed through their veins. They grew fast, too fast. They didn't toddle or crawl for long. Within days, weeks, they were walking, then running, then towering. Not just in height, but in strength, in power, in hunger. The Nephilim were giants, literal and spiritual. Their footsteps shook the ground. Their voices cracked like thunder. They could lift what men couldn't budge, break what men couldn't bend. But with their power came recklessness. Born with the celestial strength of their angelic fathers and the untempered emotion of their human mothers, the Nephilim lacked the wisdom to control either. They were divine in strength, but monstrous in will. At first, people may have marveled at these beings, but admiration turned to fear. The Nephilim didn't build, they destroyed. They didn't lead, they conquered. Villages disappeared overnight. Forests were razed, crops vanished. When they were hungry, they devoured. When they were angry, they crushed. Some grew tall as trees. Others were clever enough to outthink warlords and kings. And when they joined forces, nothing could stand in their way. Up in heaven, God watched this spreading corruption. What was once a world of promise was now consumed by terror. His image-bearers, humanity, were being slaughtered by creatures that were never meant to exist. His laws had been shattered, his boundaries violated, and still the Nephilim grew, raged, and ruled. It was time for a reckoning. The archangels. Heaven's fiercest warriors were summoned: Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel. They would confront the Nephilim head-on. But even they, with all their might, knew this battle was unlike any they had faced. These weren't demons. These were hybrids, half celestial, half mortal. And their power was not easily undone. Yet heaven had one final move left on the board. When angelic strength wasn't enough, God himself would intervene with a judgment so sweeping, so absolute, it would reset the entire world. Heaven strikes back. The world was in chaos. Giants roamed freely, entire cities crumbled under their feet, and the cries of humanity rose like smoke into the heavens. It was no longer just about forbidden love, it had become a war against creation itself. That's when the order came from the throne room of heaven. Enough was enough. The boundaries had been broken, but they would not remain shattered. It was time for heaven to act, not with whispers, but with thunder. The archangels gathered. These were not just messengers, they were heaven's warriors. Michael, Gabriel, and their celestial host took up arms, their divine armor gleaming with purpose. This was not a mission of diplomacy. This was war, and their enemy, the Nephilim, colossal, bloodthirsty, and many. Fighting them wasn't like battling demons or driving out spirits. These were flesh and blood titans born from angels, empowered by rebellion and hardened by conquest. Even for angels, the challenge was immense. For every one they felled, two more rose. For every mountain they climbed, another was leveled by the enemy. But the archangels fought not with desperation, but with destiny on their side. And when it became clear that even their might would not be enough, God himself intervened. A new strategy was unleashed, not fire, not sword, but water. A judgment not just on the Nephilim, but on the world they had corrupted. The heavens cracked open. Rain poured like wrath. Lightning tore across the skies. The roar of the storm was not just weather, it was war drums. The flood was no accident. It was a divine assault, a global cleansing designed to wipe the earth of what had been born in defiance. The Nephilim, for all their size and power, had never known fear until now. As the skies darkened and the oceans swelled, they began to understand what judgment looked like. They tried to escape, to climb, to fight the rising tide, but there was no higher ground. There was no mercy. The flood swallowed kingdoms, silenced cities, and drowned the giants who had once believed themselves invincible. It was heaven's final word on the matter. This was not just a battle, it was a reset. But what of those who had caused it? The angels who fell and the women who loved them, their punishment had only just begun. The flood that erased a generation. When judgment fell, it didn't begin with a roar, it began with a wait, a stillness. The kind of silence that chokes the air before a storm unleashes its fury. Then the first drop came, then another. And then it was as if the sky itself had been ripped open. This was not ordinary rain. These weren't spring showers or passing clouds. This was heaven weeping with wrath. The raindrops fell like stones, thick, violent, unrelenting. The wind screamed through the valleys and lightning clawed the sky like a divine beast unchained. Hour after hour, day after day, the flood rose without pause. It devoured the fields, the forests, the hills, and eventually even the mountains, the highest places once thought untouchable. The Nephilim, once feared by all, finally felt fear themselves. Their towering frames, built to conquer and destroy, were no match for rising waters. They tried to climb, to swim, to battle the storm, but nature had turned on them. And this time it wasn't just nature, it was God's will. Screams filled the air of giants, of humans, of animals, all begging for salvation. But the heavens were silent. This was the cost of crossing divine boundaries. The fallen angels, chained and helpless, watched from their dark prisons as the children they fathered, the women they once adored, and the world they had corrupted were swallowed beneath the waves. They could feel it all, the loss, the panic, the sorrow, but they could do nothing to stop it. In the midst of this storm, one vessel floated, the ark. Inside, Noah and his family, along with every species God had chosen to preserve, listened to the chaos outside, clutching tightly to the promise that they would be spared. They couldn't save the world, only survive it. And they did. While the rest of creation was washed away, the ark endured, carried not by luck, but by obedience. When the storm finally ceased after 40 endless days and nights, the earth was unrecognizable. The waves pulled back to reveal a world stripped bare, no Nephilim, no cities, no monuments of pride. Just silence, just water, and the slow, steady emergence of something new. But for the wives of the fallen, survival was not mercy. What awaited them next was darker than death, the wives of the Watchers. When the floodwaters finally receded, the world was hushed, washed clean by divine judgment. Trees had been uprooted, cities erased, and the Nephilim were gone, their enormous bones buried beneath layers of sediment and silence. But someone remained. The human women who had once loved angels now stood alone in the aftermath. Survivors, yes, but not spared. These were the wives of the Watchers, the women who had once looked into the eyes of radiant beings and felt chosen, seen, adored. Their lovers had glowed with celestial light. Their children had shaken the earth. And now, all of it was gone. The angels who once held them close were now bound in chains, imprisoned in realms of torment where no light could reach. The children they bore were lost beneath the depths of the flood. All they had left was guilt and memory. Some women broke beneath the weight. They collapsed into tears that never ended, haunted by the knowledge that their desire had helped trigger the destruction of the world. They remembered every warning they ignored, every strange thrill they had mistaken for love, every night spent in the arms of someone they were never meant to touch. But not all of them wept. One name stands out in legend: Nama. She was proud, beautiful, defiant. Even as the skies raged and the waters consumed everything, she refused to repent. She believed her power, her beauty, her connection to the divine gave her a place above judgment. But pride, as always, became her prison. God's punishment for these women was not merely physical, it was poetic, symbolic, and eternal. They were transformed into sirens, not just myth but curse, creatures of unearthly beauty who sing songs that lure the innocent to ruin. Their voices are filled with longing, sorrow, and a seductive promise that always ends in destruction. Just as they were once lured, they would now lure others, forever repeating the cycle of temptation and loss. The psychological torment was relentless. Some sirens remembered who they had once been. Others drifted into madness, their identities shattered by grief. But worst of all, the watchers, their angel husbands, could still feel their pain. Though chained in darkness, they were aware of their wives' sorrow, their loneliness, their punishment, and they were powerless to stop it. Meanwhile, the loyal angels, the ones who never rebelled, were given a new task: to guard this changed world, to ensure nothing like this ever happened again. They watched from a distance, never interfering, having learned that even heavenly compassion has limits. The earth was renewed, but the scars remained. And from those scars, one final story emerges, one last confrontation between heaven's mightiest and its most infamous traitor. Michael versus Lucifer, the battle for Moses' body. You've heard of battles fought with swords and armies. But this was different. It was a silent clash between two of the most powerful beings in the spiritual realm: Michael, the commander of heaven's armies, and Lucifer, the greatest traitor the cosmos has ever known. And what were they fighting over? Not a city, not a throne, but the body of a single man, Moses. Yes, that Moses, the deliverer of Israel, the prophet who split the sea, climbed Sinai, and spoke with God face to face. But his story didn't end at the edge of the promised land. After his death, something mysterious happened. Something the Bible hints at but never fully explains. According to the Epistle of Jude, verse 9, Michael and Lucifer disputed over Moses' body, a secret battle veiled in mystery, hidden from the eyes of mankind. But why would Lucifer want the body of a righteous man? Some say he intended to corrupt it, to turn Moses into an idol and lead the Israelites astray. Others believe Lucifer sought legal ownership, accusing Moses of past sins and claiming him unworthy of divine burial. Whatever the reason, this moment reveals something chilling: that even in death, the enemy seeks to twist what God has declared sacred. Yet Michael, though fully capable of destroying Lucifer with one word, did not act in pride. He simply said, "The Lord rebuke you," not because he lacked power, but because he trusted divine authority more than his own. In doing so, Michael demonstrated the very humility that Lucifer had abandoned long ago. It was a clash not just of angels, but of principles: pride versus obedience, accusation versus grace. And in the end, God took Moses' body for himself. Where it went, no one knows. But that battle fought in the unseen realm remains one of the most mysterious, haunting, and spiritually charged moments in all of Scripture. It reminds us that even after the flood, even after the Nephilim, the sirens, and the rebellion of heaven's brightest stars, The war is not over. There are still secrets buried in the Bible stories that were hidden for a reason. From the heights of heaven to the depths of judgment, we've followed a story that's almost too grand and too tragic to fully grasp. Angels who once sang in the presence of God chose to fall for the love of women. Women who once lived simple earthly lives became entangled in a cosmic rebellion. Their children, the Nephilim, reshaped the earth with terror. And in the end, a flood came not just to destroy, but to purify. But the echoes of their choices still linger. These aren't just stories of ancient beings and long-forgotten punishments. They are spiritual mirrors, reminders that love without truth becomes deception, that power without obedience breeds ruin, and that desire unchecked can destroy not just individuals, but generations. Perhaps you've stood at a crossroads like those angels did, drawn by something beautiful but forbidden. Maybe you felt the pull of something that promised more only to leave you with less. You're not alone. And more importantly, you're not beyond redemption. Because while the rebellious were bound, the faithful were given new assignments. And that truth remains: God still calls the loyal, still restores the broken, still watches over a world once flooded, now filled with second chances. If this journey moved you, challenged you, opened your eyes to mysteries you've never seen before, then don't let it end here. Subscribe for more revelations. Share this with someone who needs to hear the truth behind the stories they were never told. And if you've ever felt like your past disqualifies you, remember God rewrote the future even after the flood. May you walk with discernment, live with reverence, and find peace in the God who still commands the waters.